Shabadabadi, dubadabadoo. It's recording now, doesn't really fucking matter. The Psychology of Money. Timeless Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness from Morgan Housel. Housel's observation often hit the daily double. They say things that haven't been said before, and they make sense. Howard Marks. And there's nothing over here. For my parents who teach me, Gretchen who guides me, Miles and Reese who inspire me. And then a bunch of stuff. A genius is the man who can do the average thing when everyone else around him is losing his mind. Napoleon. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. Sherlock Holmes. Wow. Introduction. Alright, I'm just gonna not do the introduction. 1. No one's crazy. Your personal experiences with money make up maybe 0.00000, a bunch of zeros, and 1% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. Let me tell you about a problem. It might make you feel better about what you do with your money and less judgmental about what other people do with theirs. People do crazy things with money, but no one is crazy. Here's the thing. People from different generations, raised by different parents who earned different incomes and held different values, in different parts of the world, born into different economies, experiencing different jobs, markets with different incentives and different degrees of luck, learn very different lessons. Everyone has their own unique experience with how the world works. And what you experience is more compelling than what you learn secondhand. So all of us, you and me, everyone, go through life anchored to a set of views about how money works that vary wildly from person to person. What seems crazy to you might make sense to me. The person who grew up in poverty thinks about risk and reward in ways the child of a wealthy banker cannot fathom if he tried. The person who grew up when inflation was high experienced something the person who grew up in stable prices never had to. The stockbroker who lost everything during the Great Depression experienced something the tech worker basking in the glory of the late 1990s can't imagine. The Australian who hasn't seen the recession in 30 years has experienced something no American ever has. On and on, the list of experiences is endless. You know stuff about money that I don't, and vice versa. You go through life with different beliefs, goals, and forecasts than I do. That's not because of one of us is smarter than the other, or has better information. It's because we've had different lives shared by different and equally persuasive experiences. Your personal experience with money make up maybe 0.0000001% of what's happened in the world, maybe 80% of how you think the world works. So equally smart people can disagree about how and why recessions happen, how you should invest your money, what you should prioritize, how much risk you should take, and so on. In his book on 1930s America, Frederick Lewis Allen wrote that the Great Depression marked millions of Americans inwardly for the rest of their lives. But there was a range of experiences 25 years later. As he was running for president, John F. Kennedy was asked by a reporter what he remembered from the Depression. He remarked, "I have no first-hand knowledge of the Depression. My family had one of the great fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever then." Okay, weird wording, but fine. "We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the only thing that I saw directly was when my father hired some extra gardeners just to give them a job so they could eat. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard. This was a major point in the 1960 election, how people thought could someone with no understanding of the biggest economy story of the last generation be put in charge of the economy. It was, in many ways, overcome only by JFK's experience in World War II. That was the other most widespread emotional experience of the previous generation, and something his primary opponent Hubert Humphrey didn't have. The challenge for us is that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty. I can read about what it's like to lose everything during the Great Depression, but I don't have the emotional scars of those who actually experienced it. And the person who lived through it cannot who lived through it can't fathom why someone like me could come across as a complacent about things like owning stocks. We should see the world through a different lens. Spreadsheets can model the historic frequency of a big stock market declines, but they cannot model the feeling of coming home. Looking at your kids and wondering if you've made a mistake that will impact their lives. Studying history makes you feel like you understand something, but until you've lived through it and personally felt the consequences, you may not understand it enough to change your behavior. We all think we know how the world works, but we've only experienced a tiny sliver of it. As inventor Michael Batnick says, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. We are all victims in different ways to that truth. In 2006, economist Ulrike Malmendier and Steven Nagel from the National Bureau of Economic Research dug up 50 years of survey of consumer finances, a detailed look at what Americans do with their money. In theory, people should make investment decisions based on their goals and the characteristics of the investment options available to them at the time, but that's not what people do. The economist found that people's lifetime investment decisions are heavily anchored to the experience those investors had in their own generation, especially experience early in their adult life. If you grew up when inflation was high, you invest less of your money in bonds later in life compared to those who grew up when inflation was low. If you happen to grow up when the stock market was strong, you invested more of your money in stocks later in life compared to those who grew up when the stocks were weak. The economist wrote, "Our findings suggest that the individual investor's willingness to bear risk depends on their personal history, not intelligence or education or sophistication. Sophistication? Whatever. Just the dump luck of when and where you were born." The Financial Times interviewed Bill Gross, the famed bond manager in 2019. Gross admits that he would probably not be where he is today if he had been born a decade earlier or later. That is obvious in many different fucking ways, but sure. The piece said Gross' careers coincided almost perfectly with the generational collapse in interest rates that gave bond prices a tailwind. That kind of thing doesn't just affect the opportunities you come across, it affects what you think about those opportunities. When they presented to you, to Gross, bonds were wealth-generating machines. To his father's generation who grew up with and endured higher inflation, they might be seen as wealth incinerators. The difference in how people have experienced money are not small, even among those you might think are pretty similar. Take stocks. If you were born in 1970, the S&P 500 increased almost tenfold, adjusted for inflation, during your teens and 20s. That's an amazing return. If you were born in 1950, the market went literally nowhere in your teens and 20s adjusted for inflation. Two groups of people separated by chance of their birth year go through life with a completely different view on how the stock market works. And then there's a bracket with what stocks did in your teens and 20s, born in 1950, born in 1970, and then a bunch of numbers and whatever nonsense. Or inflation. Wait, no. I'll go back a little bit. Go through life with completely different view on how stock markets works or inflation. If you were born in 1960s America, inflation during your teens and 20s, your young, impressionable years when you're developing a base of knowledge about how the economy works, and prices up more than threefold. That's a lot. That's a lot. You remember gas lines and getting paychecks that stretched noticeably less far than the ones before them. But if you were born in 1990, inflation has been so low for your whole life that it's probably never crossed your mind. America's nationwide unemployment in November 2009 was around 10%, but the unemployment rate of African American males aged 16 to 90 without a high school diploma was 49%. For Caucasian females over the age of 45 with a college degree, it was 4%. Local stock markets in Germany and Japan were wiped out during World War II. Entire regions were bombed out. At the end of the war, German farms only produced enough food to provide the country's citizen with 1k calories a day. Compared to that to the US, where the stock market more than doubled from 1941 to the end of 1945, and the economy was the strongest it had been in almost 2 decades. No one should expect members of these groups to go through the rest of their lives thinking the same thing about inflation, or the stock market, unemployment, or money in general. No one should expect them to respond to financial information the same way. No one should assume they are influenced by the same incentives. Jokes. Maybe. Gotta put them here in there from time to time, who knows. No one should expect them to trust the same sources of advice. No one should expect them to agree on what matters, what is worth it, what's likely to happen next, and what's the best path forward is. Their view of money was formed in different worlds, and when the case a view about money that one group of people thinks is outrageous can make perfect sense to another. A few years ago, the New York Times did a story on the working conditions of Foxconn, the massive Taiwanese electronics manufacturer. The conditions are often atrocious. Readers were really brightly upset, but a fascinating response to the story came from the nephew of a Chinese worker, who wrote in the comment section, "My aunt worked several years in what Americans call sweatshops. It was hard work, long hours, small wage, poor working conditions. Do you know what my aunt did before she worked in one of these facilities? She was a prostitute." The idea of working in a sweatshop compared to that old lifestyle is an improvement in my opinion. I know that my aunt would rather be exploited by an evil capitalist boss for a couple of dollars than her body be exploited by several men for pennies. That is why I am upset by many Americans thinking we do not have the same opportunities as the West. Our governmental infrastructure is different. The country is different. Yes. Factory is hard labor. Could it be better? Yes. but only when you compare such to American jobs. I don't know what to make of this. Part of me wants to argue fiercely. Part of me wants to understand. But but mostly it's an example of how different experiences can lead to vastly different views within topics that one side intuitively thinks should be black and white. Every decision people make with money is justified by taking the information that they have at the moment of plugging it into their unique mental model of how the world works. Those people can be misinformed, they can be incomplete, they can have incomplete information, they can be bad at math, they can be persuaded by rotten marketing, they can have no idea what they are doing. Damn, they can misjudge the consequences for their actions. Oh, can they ever? Okay, that's kind of weird, bro. But every financial decision a person makes sense to them in that moment and checks the boxes they need to check. They tell themselves a story about what they're doing and why they're doing it. And that story has been shaped by their own unique experiences. Take a simple example: lottery tickets. Americans spend more on them than movies, video games, music, sporting events, and books combined. And who buys them? Mostly poor people. It's been 70 minutes, that's fine. Okay. The lowest income households in the US on average spend $412 on a year on lotto tickets. Imagine that. That's so dumb. 4 times the amount of those in the highest income groups. 40% of Americans cannot come up with $400 in an emergency, which is to say, those buying $400 lottery tickets are by and large the same people who say they couldn't come up with $400 in an emergency. They are blowing their safety nets on something with a 1 in a million's chance of hitting it big. Exactly. This is why you're all a bunch of fucking dumbasses. That seemed crazy to me. It probably seems crazy to you too, but I'm not in the lowest income group. You're likely not either. So it's hard for many of us to intuitively grasp the subconscious reasoning of low-income lottery ticket buyers. No, they're just a bunch of fucking dumbasses. That's what they are. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Everybody is able to understand that. If you buy lottery tickets, even though you can save up the money, you're a fucking dumbass. But strain a little and you can imagine it going something like this. We live paycheck to paycheck and savings seems out of reach. Our prospects for much higher wages seem out of reach. We can't afford nice vacations, new cars, health insurance, or homes in safe neighborhoods. We can't put our kids through college without crippling debt. Much of the stuff you people who read finance books either have now or have a good chance of getting. We don't. Buying a lottery ticket is the only time in our lives we can hold a tangible dream of getting the good stuff that you already have and take for granted. We are paying for a dream, and you may not understand that because you are already living a dream. That's why we buy more tickets than you do. No, I'm not living the fucking dream. I never was living the fucking dream. I'm not just fucking stupid to do that. What is that reasoning? You don't have to agree with this reasoning. Buying a lotto ticket when you are broke is still a bad idea, but I can think of understanding why lotto ticket sales persists. And that idea what you are doing seems crazy, but I kind of understand why you're doing it, uncovers the root of many our financial decisions. Few people make financial decisions purely with a spreadsheet. They make them at the dinner table or in a company meeting, places where personal history, your own unique view of the world, ego, pride, marketing, and odd incentives are scrambled together into a narrative that works for you. One moment. Aha. Another important point that helps explain why money decisions are so difficult and why there is so much misbehavior is to recognize how this new topic is. Money has been around for a long time. King Al-Yates of Lydia, now part of Turkey, is thought to have created the first official currency in 600 BC. But the modern foundation of money wait, hold on. The modern foundation of money. I so hope you die in the fucking fire. All noise and you don't even have speed. Cancer. I'm gonna edit that out. 4 minutes. But the modern foundation of money decisions, saving and investing is based around concepts that are practically infants. Take retirement. At the end of 2018, there was 27 trillion in US retirement accounts, making it the main driver of the common investor's savings and investing decisions. But the entire concept of being entitled to retirement is, at most, 2 generations old. Before World War II, most Americans worked until they died. There was the expectation and the reality. The labor force participation rate of men aged 65 and over was above 50% until the 1940s. Social Security aimed to change this, but its initial benefits were nothing close to a proper pension. When Ida Mae Fuller cashed the first Social Security check in 1940, it was for $22.45 or $416 adjusted for inflation. It was not until the 1980s that the average Social Security check for retirees exceeded $1K a month, adjusted for inflation. More than a quarter of Americans over the age of 65 were classified by the Census Bureau as living in poverty until the late 1960s. There were widespread belief along the lines of everyone used to have a private pension, but this is widely exaggerated. The Employee Benefit Research Institute explains only a quarter of those aged 65 or older had pension income in 1975. Among that lucky minority, only 50% of households' income came from a pension. The New York Times wrote in 1955 about the growing desire but continued inability to retire. To rephrase an old saying, everyone talks about retirement, but apparently very few do anything about it. It was until the 1980s that the idea that everyone deserves and should have a dignified retirement took hold, and the way to get that dignified retirement ever since has been an expectation that everyone will save and invest their own money. Let me reiterate how new this idea is. The 401k, the backbone savings vehicle of American retirement, did not exist until the I don't care about this though. Fuck it. Backbone saved. Blah 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 blah. When do you get into the good stuff? Between 20 and 50 years of experience in modern financial system, hoping to be perfectly accumulated for a topic that is so influenced by emotion versus fact. This is a problem, and it helps explain why we don't always do what we're supposed to do with money. We do all do crazy stuff with money because we're all relatively new to this game, and what looks crazy to you might make sense to me. But no one is crazy. We all make decisions based on our own unique experiences that seem to make sense to us in a given moment. Now let me tell you a story about Bill Gates, how Bill Gates got rich. Luck, risk. Luck and risk are siblings. They are both the reality that every outcome in life guided by forces other than individual effort. NYU professor Scott Galloway has a related idea that is so important to remember when judging success, both your own and others. Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Bill Gates went to one of the only high schools in the world that had a computer. The story of how Lakeside School just outside Seattle even got a computer is remarkable. Bill Dugal was a World War II Navy pilot turned high school math and science teacher. He believed that book study wasn't enough without real world experience. He also realized that we need to know something about computers when we get to college, recalled late Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. In 1968, Dugal petitioned the Lakeside School Mothers Club to use the proceeds from the annual rummage sale, about 3K, to lease a teletype Model 30 computer hooked up on the General Electric mainframe terminal for computer time-sharing. The whole idea of time-sharing only got invented in 1965, Gates later said. Someone was pretty forward-looking. Most university guaranteed schools did not have a computer anywhere near as advanced as Bill Gates had access to in 8th grade, and he couldn't get enough of it. Gates was 13 years old in 1968 when he met classmate Paul Allen. Allen was also obsessed with the school computer, and the two hit it off. Lakeside's computer wasn't part of the general curriculum. It was an independent study program. Bill and Paul could toy away with the thing at their leisure, letting their creativity run wild. After school, late into the night on weekends, they quickly became computer experts. During one of their late night sessions, Allen recalled Gates showing him a Fortune magazine and saying, "What do you think it's like to run on a Fortune 500 company?" Allen said he had no idea. "Maybe we'll have our own computer company someday," Gates said. "Microsoft is now worth more than $1 trillion. A little quick math. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million high school-age people in the world according to the UN. About 18 million of them lived in the United States. About 270K of them lived in Washington State, a little over 100K of them lived in the Seattle area, and only 300 of them attended Lakeside School. Start with the 303 million, end with 300. 1 in a million high school age students attended the high school that had a combination of crash and foresight to buy a computer. Bill Gates happened to be one of them. Okay. Gates is not shy about what this meant. If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft, he told the school's graduations in 2005. Gates is staggeringly smart, even more hardworking. Is this a love letter to Bill Gates or something? What the fuck is this? Okay, that's enough about Bill Gates. What does this have to do with fucking money? I'm just gonna skip all of this. I don't really care. I'm just gonna keep talking. Hold on. Let's see. I don't know if this is fucking worth it. Man, I don't give a shit about him. I don't give a fuck. Years ago, I asked economist Robert Shiller, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, what do you want to know about investing that we can't know? The exact role of luck in successful outcomes, he answered. I love that response. Because no one actually thinks luck doesn't play a role in financial success. But since it's hard to quantify luck and rude to suggest people's success is owed to it, the default stance is often implicitly ignored. Luck as a factor of success. If I say there are a billion investors in the world, by sheer chance, would you expect 10 of them to become billionaires? Predominantly of luck? You would reply, of course. But then if I ask you to name those investors to their face, you would likely back down. When judging others, attributing success to luck makes you look jealous and mean, even if we know it exists. And when judging yourself, attributing success to luck can be too demoralizing to accept. No, not. You're all a bunch of boys pretending to be men. Economics, Dirk, no idea, has shown that incomes among brothers are more correlated than height or weight. Sure. If you are rich and tall, your brother is more likely to also be rich and then he is tall. I think that most of us intuitively know this is true. The quality of your education and the doors that open for you are heavily linked to your parents' status. But find me two rich brothers and I'll show you two men who did not think this study's findings apply to them. Failure, which can be anything from bankruptcy to not meeting a personal goal, is equally abused. Did failed businesses not try hard enough? Were bad investments not thought through well enough? Are wayward careers due to laziness? Sometimes yes, of course. But how much? It's so hard to know. Everything worth pursuing has less than 10%, 100% odds of succeeding, and risk is just what happens when you end up on the unfortunate side of that equation. Just as luck, the story gets too hard, too messy, too complex if we try to pick apart how much of an outcome was a conscious decision versus a risk. Say I buy a stock and 5 years later it's gone nowhere. It's possibly that I made a bad decision by buying it in the first place. It's also possible that I made a good decision that had an 80% chance of making money and I just happened to end up on the side of the unfortunate 20%. How do I know which is which? Did I make a mistake or did I just experience the reality of risk? It's possible to statistically measure whether some decisions were wise, but in the real world, day to day, we simply don't. It's too hard. We prefer simple stories, which are easy but often devilishly misleading. After spending years around investors and business leaders, I've come to realize that someone else's failure is usually attributed to a bad decision, while your own failures are usually chalked up to the dark side of risk. When judging your failures, I'm likely to prefer. After spending years around investors and business leaders, I've come to realize that someone else's failure is usually attributed to bad decisions, while your own failure is usually chalked up to the dark side of risk. When judging your failures, I'm likely to prefer a clean and simple story of cause and effect, because I don't know what's going on inside your head. You had a bad outcome, so it must have been a bad caused by bad decisions. or I don't know what's going on in your side of your head. You had a bad outcome, so it must have been caused by a bad decision. That is it. It's the story that makes the most sense to me, but when judging myself, I can make up a wild narrative justifying my past decisions and attributing bad outcomes to risk. To cover up, Forbes magazine does not celebrate poor investors who made good decisions but happened to experience the unfortunate side of risk, but it almost certainly celebrates rich investors who made an okay or even reckless decision and happened to get lucky. Both flip the same coin that happened to land on the different side. The dangerous part of this is that we are all trying to learn about what works and what doesn't with money. What investing strategies work? Which ones don't? What business strategies work? Which ones don't? How do you get rich? How do you avoid being poor? We tend to seek out these lessons by observing successes and failures and saying, do what she did, avoid what he did. If we had... Are you serious? Has it not been recording again this whole time? Here we go again. For fuck's sakes, I hope everything is recording now. Assholes. We tend to seek out lessons by observing successes and failures by saying, do what she did, do what he did. If we had a magic wand, we could find out exactly what proportion of these outcomes were caused by actions that are repeatable versus the roll at random risk of luck, or whatever the fuck it says. I read this already 3 fucking times. That swayed those actions one way or another, but we don't have a magic wand. We have brains that prefer easy answers without much appetite for nuisance, blah 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 blah. And then he starts talking about the book is going on about Cornelius Vanderbilt, saying that he basically says, screw the law, I'm gonna build this railroad, blah 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 blah. And he's like wildly successful by scamming everybody and all that shit. And he's going basically about how he wants to suck dick of scammers and beat their cocks in a circle jerk because all these scammers are all the same. Like whatever the fuck basically a judge says about John D. Rockefeller, that his company is no better than a common thief. Blah 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 blah. It's often portrayed by historians as conning business smarts, even though it's not. You're just a bunch of scammers. Go fuck yourself. Maybe it was, but then does the narrative shift from you didn't let outdated laws get in the way of innovation to you committed a crime? Or how little would the story have to shift for the narrative to have turned from Rockefeller was a genius, tried to learn from his success, to Rockefeller was a criminal, tried to learn from his business failures? Very little. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about all of you. What do I care about the law? Vanderbilt once said. Ain't I got the power? He did, and it worked. But it's easy to imagine those being the last words of a story with a very different outcome. The line between bold and reckless can be thin. When we don't give risk and luck their proper billing is often invisible. Benjamin Graham is known as one of the greatest investors of all time, the father of value investing and the early mentor of Warren Buffett. No idea who these people are. But the majority of Benjamin Graham's investing success was due to owning an enormous chunk of Geico stock, which, by his own admission, broke nearly every diversification rule that Graham himself laid out in his famous text. Where does the thin line between bold and reckless fall here? I don't know. Graham wrote about his Geico bonanza. One lucky break or one supremely screwed decision. Can we tell them apart? Not easily. We similarly think Mark Zuckerberg is a genius for turning down Yahoo's 2006 $1 billion offer to buy his company. He saw the future and stuck to his guns, but people criticized Yahoo with as much passion for turning down its big buyout offer from Microsoft. Those fools should have cashed out while they could. What is the lesson for entrepreneurs here? I have no idea, because the risk and luck are so hard to pin down. There are so many examples of this. Countless fortunes and failures owe their outcome to leverage. The best and worst managers drive their employees as hard as they can. The customer is always right and the customer don't know what they want are both acceptable business wisdom. The line between inspiringly bold and foolishly reckless can be millimeter thick and only visible with hindsight. Risk and luck are doppelgangers. This is not an easy problem to solve. The difficulty in identifying what is luck, what is skill, and what is risk is one of the biggest problems we face when trying to learn about the biggest or the best way to manage money. But two things can point you in a better direction. Be careful who you praise and admire. Be careful who you look down upon and wish to avoid becoming. Or just be careful when assuming that 100% of outcomes can be attributed to effort and decisions. After my son was born, I wrote him a letter that said in part, some people are born into families that encourage education. Others are against it. Some are born into flourishing economies encouraging entrepreneurship. Others are born into war and destitution. I want you to be successful and I want you to earn it. But I realize that not all success is due to hard work and not all poverty is due to laziness. Keep this in mind when judging people, including yourself. Therefore, focus less on specific individuals and case studies and more on broad patterns. Studying a specific person can be dangerous because we tend to study extreme examples, the billionaires, the CEOs, or the massive failures that dominate the news. And extreme examples are often the least applicable to other situations given the complexity. The more extreme the outcome, the less likely you can apply its lessons to your life, to your own life. Because the more likely the outcome was influenced by extremes ends of luck or risk. You'll get closer to actionable takeaways by looking for broad patterns of success and failure. The more common the pattern, the more applicable it might be to your life. Trying to emulate Warren Buffett's investing success is hard because his results are so extreme that the role of luck in his lifetime performance is very likely high. And luck isn't something that you can reliably emulate. By realizing, as well as see in chapter 7, what the fuck is chapter 7? That people who have control over their time, I just read, this is the second part, what the fuck? That people who have control over their time tend to be happier in life in a broad and common enough observation that you can do something with it. My favorite historian, Frederick Lewis Allen, spent his career depicting the life of the average medium American. Oh god, that must be really fucking boring being to have to deal with all these fat fucking Americans, man. Who are so racist against everybody and think they're so important and have main character syndrome, princess syndrome, even though they're all fucking ugly and fat and obese. And they can't even fucking think straight. Yeah, fuck my sister, Sweet Home Alabama, we fuck our mothers. Motherfucking dumbasses, so. Fucking delusionals. How they lived, how they changed, what they did for work, what they ate for dinner, etc. They are more relevant lessons to take away from this kind of broad observation than there are in studying the extreme characters that tend to dominate the news. Bill Gates once said, success is a lousy teacher, it seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose. That is actually a pretty fucking decent quote, honestly. When things are going extremely well, they realize it's not as good as you think, you are not invisible, and if you acknowledge that luck brought you success, then you have to believe in luck's cousin, risk. I thought it was a doppelganger. You just, earlier you said it was a doppelganger, now you say it's a cousin. That's weird, bro. Which can turn your story around just as quickly. But the same is true in the other direction. Failure can be a lousy teacher because it seduces smart people into thinking their decisions were terrible, when sometimes they just reflect the unforgiving realities of risk. The trick when dealing with failure is arranging your financial life in a way that a bad investment here and a missed financial goal there won't wipe you out, so you can keep playing until the odds fall in your favor. But more important is that as much as we recognize the role of luck in success, the role of risk means we should forgive ourselves and leave room for understanding when judging failures. Nothing is as good as or bad as it seems. Now let's look at the stories of two men who pushed their luck. Never enough. When rich people do crazy things. John Bogle, the Vanguard founder who passed away in 2019, once told a story about money that highlights something we don't think about enough. At a party given by a billionaire on Shelter Island, Kurt Vonnegut informs his pal Joseph Heller that their host, a hedge fund manager, had made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his wildly popular novel Catch-22 over its whole history. Heller responds, yes, but I have something he will never have, enough. Enough? I was stunned by the simple eloquence, whatever the fuck, of that word. Stunned for two reasons. First, because I have given so much in my own life, and second, because Joseph Heller couldn't have been more accurate. For a critical element of our society, including many of the wealthiest and most powerful among us, there seems to be no limit today on what enough entails. Of course not. If I have a fucking steady income, I want to make that more and more and more and more and more. Are you shitting me? There are literally people scamming people left and right, and they still have their platforms and whatnot. There's even one of them is allowed to be in WWE. Are you fucking shitting me? This is why you Americans are fucking retarded. You suck the dick of the one that's screwing you. In a bad way. You're so smart and so powerful. None of you are. Let me offer two examples of the dangers of not having enough and what they can teach us. Rajat Gupta was born in Kolkata and orphaned as a teenager. Okay, people talk about the privileged few who begin life on the third base. Gupta couldn't even see the baseball stadium. Okay, good for you. What he went on to achieve from those beginnings was simply phenomenal. By his mid-40s, Gupta was the CEO of McKinsey, the world's most prestigious consulting firm. He retired in 2007 to take on roles with the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. He parted on philanthropic work with Bill Gates. He sat on the board of directors of 5 public companies. From the slums of Kolkata, Gupta had quite literally become one of the most successful businessmen alive. Okay, but you're pretty much almost dead, right? So you did all of that. And you're almost dead. Good job! With his success came enormous wealth. By 2008, Gupta was reportedly worth $100 million. It's an unfathomable sum of money to most. A 5% of annual return on that much money generates almost $600 an hour, 24 hours a day. Okay, he could have done anything he wanted in life, and what he wanted, by all accounts, wasn't to be a mere centimillionaire. Rajat Gupta wanted to be a billionaire, and he wanted it badly. Okay, how many people have you screwed over to get there, huh? This weirdo name sat on the board of directors of Goldman Sachs, which surrounded him with some of the wealthiest investors in the world. One of the investors, citing the paydays of private equity tycoons, described Gupta like this: I think he wants to be in that circle. That's a billionaire circle, right? Goldman is like the hundreds of millions circle, right? No idea what that is. What is that wording? Fucking weird. Right, so Gupta found a lucrative side hustle. In 2008, as Goldman Sachs stared at the wrath of the financial crisis, Warren Buffett planned to invest $5 billion into the bank to help it survive. As Goldman board member, Gupta learned of his transaction before the public. It was valuable information. Goldman's survival was in doubt, and Buffett's backing would surely send its stock soaring. 60 seconds after learning of the pending deal, Gupta, who was dialed into Goldman board meeting, hung up the phone and called a hedge fund manager named Raj. Of course, two scamming I'm not even saying anything, man. But I'm pretty sure they're one bad day away from. Welcome to customer service. I'm gonna help you for today. I'm gonna scam you now. The call was recorded, but scammer immediately bought 175 shares of Goldman Sachs, so you can guess what was discussed. The Buffett Goldman deal was announced to the public hours later. Goldman stock surge made a quick 1 million. That was just one example of an alleged trend. The SEC claims Gupta insider tips led to 70 million in profits. Exactly. You scammed. You took the information to yourself immediately without sharing it to everybody else, and you just did that in order to save your own skin. You're all a bunch of scamming bullshitters. That's what you are. It was easy money, and for prosecutors, it was even easier case. Gupta and two scammers both went to prison for insider trading. There we go. Their careers and reputation irrevocably ruined. Yes, good. Now consider Bernie Madoff. His crime is well known. I don't even know this person. Madoff is the most notorious Ponzi schemer since Charles Ponzi himself. Madoff swindled investors for 2 decades before his crime was revealed. See? Scammers. Ironically, just weeks after Gupta's endeavor. What's overlooked is that Madoff, like Gupta, was more than a fraudster. Before the Ponzi scheme that made Madoff famous, not famous enough because I don't know this person. And I am not going to look anything up about this person because everybody who looks things up about this person wants to scam people like that person did. It's fucking weird. He was wildly successful and legitimate businessman. No, he was not. What the fuck you mean? You literally just called him a scammer. What the fuck? Madoff was a market maker. A job that matched buyers and sellers of stocks. He was very good at it. Here's how the Wall Street Journal described Madoff's market-making firm in 1992. I'll do this page and then I'm done. He has built a highly profitable securities firm, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities, which siphons a huge volume of stock trades away from the big board. The 740 million average daily volume of trades executed electronically by the Madoff firm of the exchange equals 9% of the New York exchanges. Mr. Madoff firm can execute trades so quickly and cheaply that it actually pays other brokerage firms a penny a share to execute their customers' orders, profiting from the spread between bid and ask prices that most stocks trade for. This is not a journalist accurately describing a fraud yet to be uncovered. Madoff's market-making business was legitimate. A former staffer said the market-making arm of Madoff's business made between 25 million and 50 million a year. Bernie's Madoff legitimate, non-fraudulent business was by any measure a huge success. It made him hugely and legitimately wealthy. And yet the fraud. The question we should ask both Gupta and Madoff was why someone worth hundreds of millions of dollars would be so desperate for more money that they risk everything in pursuit of even more. Because they were scamming to begin with. All of them were scamming to begin with. How are you all so stupid? Crime committed by those living on the edge of survival is one thing. A Nigerian scam artist once told the New York Times that he felt guilty for hurting others, but poverty will not make you feel the pain. What Gupta and Madoff did is something different. They already had everything: unimaginable wealth, prestige, power, freedom, and then they threw it all away because they wanted more. They had no sense of enough. They are extreme examples, but there are non-criminal versions of this behavior. The hedge fund long-term capital management was staffed with traders personal worth tens of hundreds of millions of dollars each. With most of their wealth invested in their own funds, they took so much risk in the quest for more that they managed to lose everything. In 1998, in the middle of the greatest bull market and strongest economy in history, Warren Buffett later put it, to make money they didn't have and didn't need, they risk what they did have and did need. And that's foolish. It was just plain foolish. If you risk something that is important to you for something that is unimportant to you, it does not make any sense. There's no risk what you need. There's no risk what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. Sure, it's one of those things that's obvious as it is overlooked. Few of us will ever have 100 million as Gupta and Madoff did, but a measurable percentage of those reading this book will, at some point in their life, earn a salary or have a sum of money sufficient to cover every reasonable thing they need and a lot of what they want. If you are one of them, remember a few things. 1. The hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. But it's one of the most important. If expectations rise with results, there is no logic in striving for more because you'll feel the same after putting in extra effort. It gets dangerous when the taste of having more money, more power, more prestige, increases ambition faster than satisfaction. In that case, one step forward pushes the goalpost 2 steps ahead. You feel as if you're falling behind, and the only way to catch up is to take greater and greater amount of risk. Modern capitalism is a pro at 2 things: generating wealth and generating envy. Perhaps they go hand in hand. Wanting to surpass your peers can be fuel of hard work, but life isn't fun without sense of enough. Happiness, as it said, is a result of minus expectations. 2. Social comparison is the problem here. Consider a rookie baseball player who earns $500,000 a year. He is by definition rich. But say he plays on the same team as Mike Trout, who has a 12-year, $430 million contract. By comparison, the rookie is broke. But then think about Mike Trout. $36 million per year is an insane amount of money, but to make it into the list of the top 10 highest paid hedge fund managers in 2018, you needed to earn at least $340 million in 1 year. That's who people like Trout might compare their income to. And the hedge fund manager who makes $340 million per year compares himself to the top five hedge fund managers who earned at least $770 million in 2018. Those top managers can look ahead to people like Warren Buffett, whose personal fortune increased by $3.5 billion in 2018, and someone like Buffett could look ahead to Jeff Bezos, whose net worth increased by $24 billion in 2018, a sum that equates to more per hour than the rich baseball player made in a full year. The point is that the ceiling of social comparison is high that virtually no one will ever hit, which means it's a battle that it's a battle that can never be won, or that the only way to win is not to fight, but it's not fucking I don't like reading, or that is the only way to win is not to fight to begin with. sure, whatever. To accept that you might have enough even if it's less than those around you. A friend of mine makes an annual pilgrimage to Las Vegas. One year he asked the dealer, "What games do you play? And what casinos do you play in?" The dealer's stone cold serious replied, "The only way to win a Las Vegas casino is to exit as soon as you enter." That's exactly how the game is trying to keep up with other people's wealth works too. Enough is not too little. The idea of having enough might look like conservatism, sure. Leaving opportunity and potential on the table. I don't think that's right. Enough is realizing that the opposite, as insatiable appetite for more, will push you to the point of regret. The only way to know how much food you can eat is to eat until you're sick. Few try this because vomiting hurts more than any meal is good. For some reason, the same logic doesn't translate to business and investing. And many will only stop reaching for more when they break and are forced to. This can be as innocent as burning out at work or risky investment allocation you can't maintain. On the other hand, there is Guptas and Bernie Madoffs in the world who resort to stealing because every dollar is worth reaching for regardless of consequence. Whatever it is, the inability to deny the potential dollar will eventually catch up to you. For there are many things never worth risking, no matter the potential gain. After he was released from prison, Gupta told the New York Times he had learned a lesson. Don't get too attached to anything, your reputation, your accomplishments, or any of it. I think about it now. What does it matter? Okay, this thing unjustly destroyed my reputation. That's only trouble if I am so attached to my reputation. This seems like the worst possible takeaway from his experience, and what I imagine is the comforting self-justifications of a man who desperately wants his reputation back, but knows it's gone. Reputation is invaluable. Freedom and independence is invaluable. Family and friends are invaluable. Invaluable. Being loved by those who you want to love you is invaluable. Happiness is invaluable. No. Family and friends? No. Reputation? Nah. Fuck gives a shit. And your best shot at keeping these things is knowing when it's time to stop taking risks that might harm them. Knowing when you have enough. Well, when it comes to family and friends, right? Know your own worth. Seriously, stop allowing them to treat you like shit. You are just the same as the next person. You are not lower than your brother. When you are both in your fucking 30s, you're not lower than your brother. Yeah? You're not lower than your mother. You're not lower than your father. You're not lower especially than any Steph or your in-laws or whatever the fuck. Fuck that. Everything is supposed to be equal. And when it comes to friends, bruh, friends are just around you because you know you can use them and you have something that they can use. It's just that simple. The good news is that the most powerful tool for building enough is remarkably simple and doesn't require taking risk that could damage any of these things. That's the next chapter. Confounding compounding. Sure. Lessons from one field can often teach us something important about unrelated fields. Take a billion-year history of ice ages and what they teach us about growing your money. Our scientific knowledge of Earth is younger than you might think. Understanding how the world works often involves drilling deep below its surface, something we haven't been able to do until fairly recently. Isaac Newton calculated the movement of the stars hundreds of years before we understood some of the basics of our planets. It was not until the 19th century that scientists agreed that Earth had, on multiple occasions, been covered in ice. There was too much evidence to argue otherwise. all over the world set fingerprints of previously frozen world, huge boulders strewn in random locations, rock beds scraped down to thin layers. Evidence became clear that there had not been one ice age but 5 distinct ones we could measure. The amount of energy needed to freeze the planet, melt it anew, and freeze it over yet again is staggering. What on earth literally could be causing these cycles? It must be the most powerful force on our planet. And it was, just not in the way anyone expected. There were plenty of theories about why ice ages occurred to account for their enormous geological influence. The theories were equally grand. The uplifting of mountain ranges, it was thought, may have shifted the Earth's winds enough to alter the climate. Others favored the idea that the ice was the natural state interrupted by massive volcanic eruptions that warmed us up. But wait a minute. Do I just continue? Yeah, I'll just finish the space. But none of these theories could account for the cycle of ice ages. The growth of mountain ranges or some massive volcano may experience ice age. It could not explain the cycle whatever, what the fuck? Repetition of 5. In the early 1900s, a Siberian scientist named Milutin studied the Earth's position relative to other planets and came up with the theory of ice ages that we now know is accurate. The gravitational pull from the Sun and the Moon gently affected Earth's motion and tilted toward the Sun. During parts of this cycle, which can last tens of thousands of years, each of the Earth's hemispheres gets a little more or a little less solar radiation than they are used to. And that's where the fun begins. Siberian scientists' theory initially assumed that a tilt of the Earth's hemispheres caused ravenous winters cold enough to turn the planet into ice, but a Russian meteorologist dug deeper into scientists' work and discovered a fascinating nuance. I'm not reading those fucking names. Moderately cool summers, not cold winters, were the icy culprit. It begins when a summer never gets warm enough to melt the previous winter's snow. The leftover ice base makes it easier for snow to accumulate the following winter, which can increase the odds of snow sticking around in the following summer, which attracts even more accumulation of the following winter. Perpetual snow reflects more of the sun's rays, which exacerbates cooling, which brings more snowfall, and on and on. Within a few years of a seasonal snowpack grows into a continental ice sheet, and you're off to the races. The same thing happens in reverse. An orbital tilt letting more sunlight in melts more of the winter snowpack, which reflects less light in the following years, which increases temperatures, which can prevent more snow the next year, and so on. That's the cycle. The amazing thing here is how big something can grow. From a relatively small change in conditions, you start with a thin layer of snow left over from a cool summer that no one would think anyone of, and then in a geological blink of an eye, the entire Earth is covered in miles-thick ice. And glaciologist Gwen put it, it is not necessarily the amount of snow that caused ice sheets, but the fact that snow, however little, lasts. The big takeaway from ice ages is that you don't need tremendous force to create tremendous results. If something compounds, if a little growth serves as fuel for future growth, a small starting base can lead to results so extraordinary they seem to defy logic. It can be so logic defying that you underestimate what's possible where growth comes from and what it can lead to. And so it is with money. More than 2K books are dedicated to how Warren Buffett built his fortune. Many of them are wonderful, but a few pay enough attention to the simplest fact: Buffett's fortune isn't due to just being a good investor, but being a good investor since he was literally a child. Basically get everything from your mommy and daddy, right? Fuck off, man. All you rich people have easy talk.